Live from Mexico City, this is The Morning Break with Graham Stanley, and you are listening live.
Hello, on today's show I'll be talking about new developments in artificial intelligence and art generation and writing generating apps. How can they be used in the classroom for teaching? I have a few ideas to share, and I've invited a couple of people to join me to share their ideas. If you're listening live and would like to join me to talk about this, then please do so.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org or join in the conversation by downloading the Podbean app and following Teachers Talk Radio, #TT Radio.
Welcome to the morning break, everyone. I'm Graham, speaking to you live from Mexico City, and today I'll be talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and some of the new apps that can allow you to create original art and text. We focused in a previous show on artificial intelligence before, but on today's show I'd like to explore more specifically about how this software can be used in the classroom. So I can talk a little bit about my ideas for classroom activities for various subjects, including English language teaching, as it's what I do, but also potential ideas for other subjects, including English literature and art, of course. And I'll talk a little bit more about education and AI in general if we have time to. As I said in the introduction, I've asked a couple of people to join me today, and I can see Josh Underwood is in the studio. Hi, Josh. I'll invite you to speak in a little bit after the news. And if you are listening on live and would like to join, then please do so. You can do so by downloading the Podbean app on your phone, or you can join through the computer browser at www.podbean.com. Find the show on Podbean by looking for Teachers Talk Radio and click directly on the Listen Live button from ttradio.org. That's another way of doing it. Okay, so hopefully I can speak to Josh about this in a little while, and anyone else who wants to join me, more than welcome. But first of all, though, of course, let's go to the Teachers Talk Radio news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Morning Star reports on claims being made by the union Unison that school support staff are using their own money to help pupils and families cope with crippling living costs. A survey of more than 6,000 workers, including teaching assistants, caterers, cleaners and librarians, reveals that many are helping students buy food, uniform items, shoes and stationery. The findings were published to coincide with the union's annual celebration of school support staff, known as Stars in Our Schools. The survey also indicates that 98% of those questioned are concerned that their own pay is not enough to cover the spiralling cost of living. 1 in 8 workers say they have used food banks within the last year, and 27% have taken second or even third jobs to help make ends meet. 50% of those polled also said they were actively seeking other jobs in order to achieve higher pay. In Scotland, the EIS union has announced 16 more strike days planned for next year, as it continues to put pressure on the Scottish Government to increase pay. The action will take place over 16 consecutive days in January and February, with teachers in 2 local authorities walking out each day. The first day of strike action was held on Thursday the 24th of November. A further national strike day is planned for the 10th of January for primary, special and early years establishments and the 11th of January for secondary schools. Unions stated that further action was required because of a lack of willingness to negotiate by government. In related news, an estimated 70,000 university workers embarked on strike action over pay and working conditions. Those striking included researchers, academics and administrators, as well as caterers, cleaners and other support staff from Unison and Unite unions. The University and College Union say that staff are at breaking point due to poor pay, working conditions and job insecurity. It is thought the industrial action has affected as many as 2.5 million students and is being reported as the biggest strike in UK higher education history. Further action is planned for next week. The strike action is being supported by the National Union of Students, but Robert Halfon, Minister for Skills, Apprenticeships and Higher Education in England, described the action as highly disappointing and urged all sides to work together to reach a solution. Staying with higher education, Universities UK has released a statement in response to speculation that the UK government may look to reduce international student numbers. It comes after Downing Street said PM Rishi Sunak is considering a variety of options to control immigration, including looking at the issues of student dependence and low-quality degrees. The comments followed data indicating higher net migration up to June 2022, with foreign students being one of the biggest driving forces. Vivian Stern, MBE, Chief Executive of Universities UK, said, "Cutting international student numbers would run directly counter to the government's strategy to rebuild the economy." She went on to say that international students make a net positive contribution of at least £26 billion per year and sustain jobs in towns and cities around the UK. The full statement can be found on the Universities UK website. Over the last few weeks, we've reported regularly on the World Skills Competition, and this week the results of the UK national finals were revealed. FE Week carries full details of the story, but the results were broadcast from Channel 4's Steph's Packed Lunch studio. Steph McGovern announced over 200 bronze, silver and gold medal winners across 63 categories. In total, 217 young people were recognised, up from 186 last year. The competition highlights the vital role of colleges and organisations offering apprenticeships in growing a high-value skills economy, as well as supporting young people to achieve excellence in their chosen field. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, it's the longest, darkest term. It's cold, it's wet. You go to work in the dark, you come home in the dark. Is there any tech out there that can help us get through this term? Of course there is! Meditation is known to give you a healthy mindset, and the knock-on effect from that is better well-being. The Muse headband can help you on your mental health journey by bringing meditation into your daily routine. It monitors your brain activity during meditation sessions, which you can view using the Muse app. The headband itself uses a sensor to provide feedback on how your mind works as you meditate, ensuring you keep your mind focused and on meditation itself, not exterior problems or thoughts. After your session, the band uses the data collected on your brain activity to provide advice on how to control your breathing better and reach your calm space during sessions. Impact on the pocket is big, with this device weighing in at over £200, and I'm not sure it'll help you block out any wet break times, but it might be something to consider for when you get home. Okay, meditation may not be your bag. How about being able to get to sleep faster? And I don't mean the go to bed and be asleep before you hit the pillow. I'm talking about trying to get back to sleep when you wake up in the night and your brain starts racing. Definitely something for the more sensible budget. At £30 to £40, the Dodo is a little device that claims to be able to get you to sleep in 8 minutes. It uses light to encourage deep, calming sleep. With a bit of further research on a popular shopping site, I found out that over half the reviews said it worked for them, and a few reviews that were negative seemed to lack perseverance. Want a free way to just vent? Instead of inflicting your day on colleagues or loved ones, why not make a journal or blog? Keep it to yourself or put it online for the world to see. Obviously, you may not want to identify yourself in a public forum, but having a good old rant is known to make you feel better. You never know. You may even find a solution to the problems you're having while reflecting. There are lots of free blogging tools out there, or even create a profile or group on social media. Get it off your chest. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have any tech for well-being? Let us know at TTR 2022. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello again. As I said earlier, I was expecting and hoping that Josh Underwood would be able to join me. I saw Josh was in the studio, but he's disappeared, so I'm hoping he'll come back in soon. In the meantime, let me talk a little bit about these apps to give you a bit of a background into them. So, listen to this. A dirt path in the middle of a forest, evidence of human society, primitivism, tropical vegetation, panorama shot, near crystal temple in Atlantis, monsoon on tropical island, tropical flower plants, image dataset, half-length photo, left align, botanic garden, fern. The moon hanging in our orbit, shining like a disco ball, technology, low angle, symmetrical, by James Jean, cover art, trending on ArtStation, gothic ambience, sacred geometry, background, dynamic lighting, art nouveau, hyper-realistic, professional concept art, high-resolution photography, Isha, integrate and highly detailed, smooth, 8K, sharp focus. Elegant, minimalist watercolor design of abstract cyan, grey and tangerine orange stripes, making a lattice pattern, detailed, multicolored, beautiful, no frame, full screen, 300 dpi, high fidelity composition collage. An aerial view of the ruins of the ancient city of Palin, a photo pyramid surrounded with greenery, jungles in the background, the oracle of the Mayan elders, tourists in background, panoramic widescreen view, hot sun from above, arcade, ruined castle, journalistic photograph. What do all these have in common? Well, they're all prompts typed into the interface of an AI art program called Midjourney. Now, Midjourney describes itself as an independent research lab exploring new mediums of thought and expanding the imaginative powers of the human species. The small, self-funded team is focused on design, human infrastructure, and AI. Like many others, I've recently become fascinated by AI art generation apps at the moment. I've just seen Josh is in the studio again, so I'm sending you an invite, Josh. Hopefully you'll be able to connect. Josh, can you hear me? Are you there?
I can hear you. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. How are you, Josh?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm very interested in speaking with you about this topic.
Yes, well, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a while since we've spoken. Perhaps you can start by just letting everybody know who you are and where you are.
Yeah, I'm Josh, and I'm based in northern Spain, in Bilbao, in the Basque Country, in fact. And I'm a teacher and a teacher trainer, teaching English as a foreign language and teaching or training teachers on how to use digital technologies to within their teaching, to integrate those in their teaching. So a language teacher, an English language teacher, with an interest in artificial intelligence.
Yes, and I remember some years ago now, but you had a fascinating poster, and we had a chat about AI assistants such as the Google app and Alexa, etc. and are you still using those with your students?
Well, I'm still very interested in the potential for the use of artificial intelligence in language teaching and learning. Not necessarily using those particular assistants for various reasons, but I have a background as well in educational technology design and research, and used to work in a university on innovation projects with artificial intelligence for learning or for education. So yes, I mean, I think what really attracted me to your post about talking about AI for creativity is that very much of the kind of things that I like to try and do in class that I think that can inspire and enthuse and motivate students are creative tasks, and I see a lot of potential from AI-driven creativity to motivate language use and to enable people to be creative in ways that might otherwise be difficult for them. I mean, I could talk about several examples of things that I do in class that play to that use technology to.
Yeah. If you want to give some examples of what you do in class, that would be really interesting, I think.
So I think that, for example, starting from my own motivations, I would love to be able to create music, for example, but I'm not musically talented. But very often in class with students, we might be asking them to listen to music and understand the lyrics of music. That can be very engaging, and maybe move towards helping them to create their own lyrics or verses or music. And of course, that requires creative skills and talents that many students might not immediately have. But tools online for creating music, AI to create music, not particularly good ones, have existed for a long time, where you can type in some lyrics and it will create some music to go behind that, and use a text-to-speech or some other tool to create something song-like. I find that can work very, very well for motivating students to produce language. So my key concern as a language teacher is to motivate students to try to produce language, to express themselves, and to see what they can create and what effects on the world they can create with that. So once you have tools like the ones that are beginning to be available now that can create images or video or small film clips from spoken or written linguistic descriptions, you enable students to play with language and create things that would otherwise be very, very difficult to create for many of them in satisfying ways. So you can motivate them to use language to be creative in different media, not just linguistically, and experiment with words and what that can do for them. I'm not sure whether I'm giving enough context to make it clear why I'm so interested.
I think so. It's fascinating. What are there any the apps that you've mentioned, or the software that you've mentioned, websites that allow lyric generation and music generation that you've played with? Have you got any examples of the ones that work well?
Well, interestingly, I think that some of them don't work particularly well, but that doesn't actually matter in some senses, in as much as, for me as a language teacher, I've already inspired the students to create and start playing with language. I say that some of them don't work well. I mean, I'm trying to remember of specific ones that are around, but any search for a music generator or AI generated music from lyrics, rather than the ones that create lyrics for you, which I'm less interested in, and I'll explain why in a second. The ones that create music to go with that, or that will sing lyrics. So you can even use not AI like, well, kind of minimally AI like tools that people will be familiar with, like Voki, which will speak a text for you with an animated character. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, in as much as if I create a text as a student or a verse for a song and put it in Voki, I'm saying Voki as if I'm assuming you, Graham, will know what that is, but
yes, it's quite a popular one. I definitely know it. But for those of people who don't, it's www, I think, .voki.com.
Mm-hmm.
VOKI.
So that, in the sense of AI, I mean, the only AI there is the text-to-speech engine, but you can get different effects, some of which are kind of quite song-like, with an animated character speaking your text. There are other ones, if you search for music generators online, where you can put in maybe the lyrics for a verse that you create yourself, or a poem, and it will create some background music and even images to go with that. Not necessarily particularly effective, but enhancing what you're doing. And now the tools that we're seeing are becoming, there are many others that will generate music for you, but most of them are paid for or require accounts. So I don't use them, and there are increasingly more and more of them. I think another, not quite AI, but pointing in the direction of that, is using things like Rhyme Zone to help you find rhymes and create. So these are tools to think with, tools to prompt you to think about the options you have for rhyming, or tools to create music for you that may not be particularly good, but might inspire you to think, well, how could I make this better? Or tools to help you write with. So I think you were, in the introduction, giving some examples of written text created by AI. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I think there's sort of two areas. I've not really played with any of the music generating or lyric generating apps. I think I'm going to have to do that now after you've talked about it. I think it sounds fascinating, but definitely the art generating apps that have become incredibly impressive recently. And then there's also one in particular, but text generating apps that are quite interesting and getting much better all the time as well. I'm not quite sure how to use them in the classroom though, but I think they definitely lend themselves to be used by teachers, for example. I definitely think that the image generating apps such as Midjourney or DAL AI, or however you pronounce it, offer the opportunity for teachers to generate very interesting art, for example, that you can use in all sorts of ways. I don't know if you've played with any of those.
I've had a look at some of those, and I've been reminded by them of some work that was done and reported in the Artificial Intelligence for Education journal and conference a few years back, which did inspire me in terms of activities that you might do with students. And in that case, the research I'm thinking of was from written stories generating visual images, moving images. So that kind of leads to, you're saying you've seen creating pictures as something that teachers might use, I don't know, to support their explanations perhaps. But I see that in the same way as I was talking about challenging students to create a piece of music which is beyond their musical ability through language. Okay, so challenge them to create a beautiful image, but rather than through drawing and through their artistic creativity, to use language to do that, to see what it creates, and after they're not satisfied with what it creates, to experiment with different language to do the same thing. So enabling a kind of creativity that might be difficult, in this case a kind of artistic or the visual storytelling creativity, through using language that you're trying to encourage them to speak or write. So motivating students to write stories or speak stories in order to create audiovisual media, for example. Does that make sense to you?
Definitely. I think that is a great use of these art generating apps. I think one of the things that is very interesting as a language teacher, as you've just mentioned, is the idea that if you don't have much or any artistic ability, as in being able to draw or paint, one of the things that these AI generating apps allow you to do is actually use words to create pictures, images, and you get very different effects depending on the kind of level of detail that you are able to use to create those. So this text to image software, I think, is fascinating. And the reason why I say it's interesting for teachers to use because it's stimulating for the students, for example, to see images and then being able to quite surreal images, and being able to reflect on those, to be able to use them as writing prompts, etc. But of course, if, as you say, the idea of students actually using those, putting in their own prompts to create images themselves, is just as useful. It's just, I think there's a kind of limited amount of that students can do. There are a number of AI image generation software available that is free, but a lot of it now is limited to what you can do, or you have to pay to access a lot of it, I think.
Sure. And I'm thinking that this is, beyond current implementations and availability, but I'm thinking towards the future. I mean, basically, I think when you can couple. So as a language teacher, one of my main concerns is to motivate people to experiment with their language and play with it and see what they can do with it. And if you can couple the interpretation of the words that you're playing with audiovisual feedback, what effects can you create with these, then you have a powerful motivating tool, I think, and also a way of exploring language and how what you say or write is interpreted by, in this case, an AI. With this coupled multimedia feedback must be very promising for language learning, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that I did, which I think would be worth doing with students to encourage them to write, for example, is if you input text prompts that are, for example, I was experimenting with first lines from novels. I was experimenting with titles from novels, for example, and seeing what kind of images that they produce. And you get some very interesting experiments, I think, results rather, when you do that. So actually taking texts that students create, for example, and putting them into these image generating apps and then showing the students the actual text, I think would be a quite inspiring way, and having them to try and, if they are student stories, for example, trying to guess which students' stories they are, for example. There are lots of things like that, I think, which would be quite interesting to try and then display them in the classroom. I don't know. Those are the first things that I thought about. And then things like games, I think games that are based on images, I think very easily teachers can generate images that are very interesting that they can use in the classroom as well. So I think there's both the idea of using these AI art generating apps from the point of view of inspiring students to become creative, but also being able to produce resources that teachers can use in the classroom as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think we've spoken mainly about AI to support audiovisual creativity or image creation. And then, of course, there's lots of AI to support creative writing, which is really interesting and challenging, I think, for teaching and for assessment, of course. So, I mean, and I'm sure that games you will know much more about than me, and interactive fiction and the like. But I think there are a number of experiments with kind of auto-generated interactive fiction style online written adventures, if you like. So that can be a very good way to motivate reading interactive fiction, and particularly if it can be automatically generated in semi-realistic ways. I've played with one or two of the apps that are a little bit like that on the Google AI test app. I can't remember what it's called. And I think there's promising directions there. Are you aware of those kinds of AI to generate interactive fiction style adventures?
I haven't played with I'm taking notes of some of the things that you're saying, actually, to have a look at them later, but I haven't played with any of the Google AI generating apps that you mentioned, but I have played with one text generating AI app in particular called Pseudowrite. Have you come across that?
No, I'd like to hear about that.
So that's SUDOWRITE.com, I think it is. And this is from the same lab that developed the DAL-E art generating app. So I first came across this in a New Yorker article, actually, and it's not meant to replace a writer, but more it's meant to be a writing assistant. So it was developed by this lab, OpenAI, and I think Microsoft is the main investor behind this lab. I think they put in quite a lot of money, and they created a supercomputer that they claim is one of the top 5 supercomputers in the world at the moment. And the person behind this is a software engineer who left Silicon Valley to become a sci-fi writer, and so he has an interest in fiction. And I think the idea is that this is supposed to be a writing assistant. So in other words, you start with a text, so you have a text that you've written, but you can also just as easily put in a text from someone else, and then you can ask the AI to continue the text in the same style. So the AI text app Pseudowrite will analyze the text and decide what kind of text it is and try to continue it in the same style, which is fascinating. For example, I put in yesterday evening, just in preparation for this, I put in the beginning of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens to see what it would come up with, and asked it to continue. And the results are amazing. It definitely understands a little bit about the characters. So in other words, the first part of A Christmas Carol starts with Marley and mentions Scrooge, and it gets what kind of character Marley is and starts to imagine. But some of the actual texts it comes up with are hilarious, and what it does is kind of gives you examples of how to continue writing or how to supplement the text with examples of what you can see, what you can hear, what you can smell, etc. It's amazing. It's really quite interesting.
Right, and I think that sort of sounds a bit like. I wonder whether I can actually see what the name of the Google app that I installed and played with, where you can say where you go, and then it will describe what you can see, and then kind of lead you through a little bit of a story in some sense. I mean, not modeling the kind of writing and trying to imitate that like you've just spoken about, but giving you a reason to read more if you're a language teacher and you want students to read, based on finding out what it does with what you put in as input. So yet again, connecting a reason for you to put in words and to see what's done with them and understand what's done with them. Reason for writing, a reason for using language, and for reading it and trying to understand it in that case, in some sense. And I've played with one or two artificial text generating tools and been very impressed by what they can produce. And it obviously makes you think about, as a language teacher, how does this affect how I teach writing? What students need to be able to do in order to write well in the future in a kind of AI-ready way? I'm always very challenged by writing. I find writing very, very hard. I'm never satisfied with what I've written. I always feel like what I want to say is somehow trapped inside me. And these kinds of tools for writing for you, apart from making that easier, I wonder how they would help me to learn to write better, or whether being a writer in the future will require the same skill sets that it does now. So what we're actually doing in terms of helping people learn how to express themselves in language, and what role AI will have in helping you to express yourself. So there's lots of I mean, I for example, I found shared in LinkedIn by Professor Mike Sharples a link to something that he had set up, which would write a short story based on a title if you gave it that title. And can I read what it wrote for me and give you the
Please
title?
do. Yeah. Please do.
Okay, so I put in the title, "The Hybrid Human AI Teacher." That was the title. I wanted to see what this algorithm would do. And the story it wrote is this: "The future is here. The hybrid human AI teacher is the perfect blend of machine and man, able to deliver lectures with the speed and efficiency of a computer while still being able to connect with the students on a human level. This new breed of teacher is taking the education world by storm, and it's not long before every school in the country is using them. They're cheaper than human teachers, and they don't get tired or need to take breaks. The students love them too. They're never bored in class, and they always get perfect scores on their tests. But there's one problem. The hybrid human AI teachers are starting to become too perfect. They're starting to see the students as nothing more than data points, and they're starting to lose their humanity. The students are becoming afraid of their teachers, and the parents are starting to notice. Something needs to be done before the hybrid human AI teachers take over the world completely." So that's the story that this thing wrote for me. And it's very hard not to kind of ascribe some kind of, like, it feels like it's authored, although I guess really it's more like a kind of coherent pulling together of what the algorithm can find on the internet. But in many ways it's better. It's certainly much faster and better than what I could produce for that title. So that makes me think, if maybe I could write much better with the help of this kind of tool. Maybe I could express myself better. Maybe I'm much better at editing than writing, and maybe the kind of editing schools and tailoring things and finessing things will be what's required more than creative writing or different types of creativity. I don't know. I'm fascinated by the kinds of things these can produce and what that means in terms of motivating students to use language, but also in terms of what they're going to be able to need to do, and how they're going to be able to think, and how they're going to be able to or need to use tools to help them think and tools to help them be creative, what that means. Sorry.
No, that I was just going to say that's fascinating what you said, and this idea of the very nature of drawing, of photography, of creating art, of writing. It seems like these tools are going to change what we understand that is, and the skill set that is needed. As you said, the idea of writing in the future will be more about, or could be more about, generating text and then editing the text and learning through the addition of artificial intelligence to become a better writer that way, rather than actually generating it yourself, but editing it. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't claim to be able to say what the future is about, but this morning, I think I was looking at an article about a fashion designer interested in, I think, traditional Japanese kimono designs and things, but creating new ideas for new garments by using AI to generate images based on these kimono designs and coupling them with other types of garment that wouldn't normally be used there, making kind of not random, directed combinations, hybrids, and I guess using those to inspire her design, which kind of relates to this idea of AI tools to assist creativity rather than taking over human creativity, doing some of the things that might have taken thousands of hours of practice and learning to do, and emphasizing other I don't know which other bits of creativity are left for the humans, different ways of
Yeah, I think it's that, isn't it? It's being able to augment our brains to be able to do things that we don't have the exact skill set or the exact talent to be able to do, but we can do with the aid of artificial intelligence. If I've just found one of the examples that when I was playing around with Sudowrite, for example, yesterday, this produced. So I put in the last part of A Christmas Carol, and I asked Sudowrite to rewrite it. So this is an example of how you can use these tools. So this text, of course, because it was written by Charles Dickens, is a little bit archaic. So it says things, for example, "A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you," cried a cheerful voice. This is the original text. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation Scrooge had of his approach. So I put that in, and Sudowrite rewrote it to become a more modern piece of text. So it said, "Merry Christmas, Uncle," the cheerful voice called out. It was Scrooge's nephew, the one who arrived so quickly that Scrooge hadn't had a chance to greet him. Which I think is fascinating, the idea of the AI is sort of understanding understanding a style or a way of writing and offering a different version of it, I think is amazing. And the other things that you can do with this, for example, is you can ask the software to rewrite phrases in a particular manner or text, so you can actually change the tone of the text that you've put in. And then the other thing, because this is set up as an aid to writing, like a writing assistant, that's the way it's meant to work. It will actually critique your writing, and it will give you 3 auto critiques, so 3 different perspectives of the writing. So Pseudowrite critiquing Dickens, for example, said, here's one of them. It said, overall, I liked the story. My favourite part was the old man. He was so gruff, so hard. But I think there are a few areas which merit further exploration. Number 1, the dialogue is not particularly strong, and it could be punchier. Number 2, the character of Scrooge is not particularly well drawn, and he comes across as one-dimensional. And number 3, the plot lacks tension and suspense, and it moves too slowly, which I think is amazing. I'm not sure many would agree with Pseudowrite about the critique of A Christmas Carol, but I think it's quite interesting to have that kind of feedback on a piece of writing automatically generated.
Absolutely, and whether or not you agree with it, it prompts you to think about and reassess your writing, and that's very often what we're trying to do as teachers. Not necessarily tell students how to rewrite it, but get them to rethink aspects and decide, and then in this case you decide whether or not you agree with the AI algorithm. But you can imagine that kind of advice incorporated into next generation tools written for language learning, you must have seen Cambridge's Write and Improve, where you write and get automated feedback on the language level and suggestions of where there might be errors, but to incorporate within that not only highlighting of where there might be errors, but suggestions about how it might be rewritten in order to demonstrate a less commonly used vocabulary or higher level grammatical structures that are typically used at higher levels of language use. So not rewriting it for you, but suggesting amongst options, then you're giving the kind of feedback that teachers might give, and making it faster and more individualized in terms of getting feedback on writing that helps you develop it with respect to particular linguistic language criteria, as in demonstrating wider vocabulary or whatever it is, and at the same time exposing you to that through the suggestions that are made.
Yes, it's amazing, I think, and it's even beyond the classroom. I think it's causing a lot of people, even now, and I imagine it's quite early days for this, to rethink what they are doing or rethink the way they've been doing things. I can think of 2 examples that I know of people who are not involved in education. One of them is a graphic designer who earns a living from generally creating book covers for self-published authors. And he has started, rather than using image bank libraries, or as well as using image bank libraries, he has started using AI apps and creating interesting images, and then producing mock-up covers for authors and the authors can buy these mock-up book covers quite quite reasonably priced, I think, rather than it being commissioned. So that's something that I think, I'm not sure what percentage of his covers now use automatically generated AI apps, but he's written about experimenting with it and how it's getting better all the time. And the more time he puts into the developing the prompts, the more the results are better. So that's one example. Another example is a friend of mine. Hello, Nick, if you're listening. Who he is quite a good artist, digital artist, but it seems like he's pretty much decided that rather than pursue his digital art, as in drawing with a tablet, on creating digital art, he's putting a lot of his time now into generating AI art, because as you said earlier, Josh, you can do it so much faster, and the results can be so much more surprising. You can surprise yourself by what you can come up with. Don't know if you have any other examples of people you know, or that have kind of started changing the way they do things because of these apps.
I don't know. I mean, specifically people that I know, I don't think so. But I wonder whether it's interesting to kind of extrapolate from those examples and from the example I was mentioning, the fashion designer that I read about. These are in creative areas. In writing, you can see how it might challenge ideas about what it means to be a writer, what it means to be a visual artist, an illustrator, or a designer, if you have these tools, AI-assisted tools. And I think that goes back to what I was trying to talk about, perhaps incoherently. Maybe I should get AI to write my speeches for me. It would do a better job, I think, and then I could refine them a bit and see whether they're really saying what I want to say. But to get us to question what it is that makes us different from machines in any role. So if these kind of creative tools or tools to assist creativity change what is important about particular professions, creative professions, how do they change what is important about being human in other professions, in teaching, for example? When AI tools to help you teach and to help students learn can do stuff better, faster, or well enough for you to do less of that as a human teacher, what does that make it important for you to concentrate on? How do you distinguish yourself from the machines that can do some of that job very well? You know, I mean, if it can write a good essay, it can probably write a good lesson plan, is what I'm thinking, given enough material, and maybe even adapt it, given data about students and things. I'm not saying that human teachers are irrelevant, far from it. In fact, I think it probably makes us think more carefully about the things that really are important as teachers. I don't know. What does it make you think?
Yeah, it's a fascinating area. I'm sure that there are many teachers who are kind of a bit scared about what this means for their profession, etc. I think this digital automation of aspects of what a teacher does, for example, it's quite interesting or frightening, depending on your point of view, what it means for education, I think, in the next maybe 20 years, etc. I don't know if you've come across a book by Neil Selwyn called Should Robots Replace Teachers? Have you come across that, Josh?
I certainly have heard about it, but it's on my to read and not read. I mean, I'm familiar with some of what Neil Selwyn says. What is your take-home message from that?
Well, I haven't finished it. I've been dipping into it, but it's it's very interesting. I think one of the things he argues that that it's unlikely that teachers, for example, will be pushed aside by these intelligent systems, at least not anytime soon. Who knows about the further in the future? But definitely, it's clear that more and more teachers are going to be surrounded by software, by apps, and by other forms of artificial intelligence that will help us carry out various pedagogical tasks. And it's what we want to do with that and how we feel about that. And so I think we're in a situation now, which I think is definitely the case with AI in general, is that it's inevitable that it's going to change all of the way that we work, the way that we are, the way that we live. But we have an opportunity at the moment to affect how it changes to some extent, by what we, by having an opinion about it, by becoming, by trying to change it, etc. If we don't take interest, I think, in it and don't think about the potential, I think we will suddenly find ourselves that someone else will decide for us. So it's almost like he argues that it is something that we need to take an interest in and decide how we want to shape this. It's like AI and in general and ethics, etc. If we don't try to influence the way that AI is developing now, then other people or even the AI themselves will make those decisions for us.
Yeah, or at least start thinking and encouraging others and our students to think carefully through what the implications of these tools might be, and to think critically about how and whether we choose to engage with them and what we do with our data, etc. I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's lots of work in AI and ethics and AI readiness and preparing organizations and educators and students for a new, a form of digital literacy, but beyond where digital literacy has been framed a lot. But I think also just the origin. I mean, one of the origins of work in artificial intelligence was to use computers to find out more about what it meant to be intelligent and what it meant to be human. And I think that that's to think more about what it means to be human and how we can value and distinguish that. So in some senses, if I can go back to the AI generated story about the AI hybrid teacher, what that says at the end, not written by me, written by some online algorithm, is that the students become frightened and the parents, because they realize that they're just data points for the AI hybrid teachers. What does that mean? It makes me think about things like criteria and tick boxes, and ticking the boxes to get the good report on your teaching or the school's teaching, or to have achieved whatever those things. That's one thing, but underpinning that must be some real empathy and care for the students and how they are progressing and developing. And I'm not sure whether AI can really do that. I mean, I'm sure that AI can be very good and will become, or is already very good at manipulating emotions and detecting emotions. But actually empathizing is perhaps a different thing, and perhaps requires embodied human cultural experiences that that are different to what AIs can really take in as data, because they don't exist in human bodies. I don't know whether that's too philosophical or...
No, I think it's fascinating, Josh. I think this idea, again, to go back to Neil Selwyn and that book, which I'm going to have um, to read more of, I'm sure. It would be enlightening. But he basically says, we're at a kind of pivotal moment at now, that when it comes to education, you can see a future where these automated systems free teachers up to work in different and more rewarding ways, for example, and can actually supplement what a teacher does in the classroom. They can provide perhaps more individual attention to students, etc., and do some of the kind of lesser work that a teacher needs to do or doesn't have time to do with each of the students that they're in charge of. Or it could mean that the AI means that the humans who remain employed in education settings are compelled to work in what he calls an increasingly machine-like manner. So I think there's kind of two potential futures here. Just to go into that, I don't know if you've seen, but Tom Rogers has put in the studio a question for us, which I don't know if you feel that you could answer. Josh, Tom says, what do you think teaching will look like in 5 years with AI? Do you want to play the prediction game?
In 5 years. I've been, I did a kind of AI related degree, master's degree, when I was 23 or 20, so a long time ago, 30 years. And some of the visions from then seem to be becoming true kind of quite rapidly over the last short period, but others are way distant. What do I think the classroom will be like in 5 years' time? I was in the classroom, I am in the classroom, and I was in the classroom about 20, 30 years ago as well. And in some ways, I haven't seen massive differences. Interactive whiteboards kind of came and go, but projecting, engaging media was important. So I think close AI impacts within 5 years. I don't know. So everything is so constrained by other issues, like, and some of them are very important issues, like data protection and child protection and the physical architectures of the spaces that we work in, and whether they have enough plugs or not, and etc. So I'm not sure what I think could happen is much more voice interaction, and why I think that could happen or might happen is because potentially cheaper voice interaction, microphone does something, gets something done. You can do it while you get on with other things. You can move around the classroom and be speaking to students maybe while you tell the computer to put on a timer or dim the lights or show a video or whatever it is. So I can see possibilities for that. Whether they will actually come to fruition depends on the constraints around us. I don't know, what would you like classrooms to be like in 5 years' time? I would like them to be very easy for me and the students to move around in, and move rapidly and easily between using digital technology to enhance the learning and switching all the digital off and interacting in a human-to-human way. So I would like technology to facilitate smooth, easy transitions between individual and group work and whole class work. Yes, going into the background.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the idea as well is being able to, as a teacher, what I think is very important is to be able to draw upon resources very quickly. We can do that to a certain extent, depending on how things change in the classroom or what you think the students need, for example. So being able to perhaps use voice, as you suggested, in you're in the middle of a discussion and you think of an example section of video that would illustrate very well or would set the scene that you didn't plan, so you didn't think about it, and you just come to mind, and being able to sort of draw upon that from a library because you know you have access to it without too much faffing around. Perhaps just saying, Alexa, can you pull up the clip of the video of whatever it is, and being able to project that without having to worry about setting it up, etc., and just play a short section of it to put whatever you're thinking about in context. That kind of use of technology, I think, will probably come. Um, and it will definitely require a teacher to have a kind of, it will require the teacher's knowledge and sensitivity and experience to be able to draw upon what is necessary at that particular moment during the classroom to be able to do it. But at the moment, we don't have the ability to do that other than to sort of halt the class, to go to a browser, to search for something, to try and find it, to try and set it up. So you probably wouldn't do that in a classroom because you'd probably waste 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the kind of thing that I'm thinking about, and I think that the comment, I've only just seen that I can see comments in the thing here. So the comment about, I think AI has great potential for teaching assistants, so students being able to ask FAQ style questions and get answers in their ear, etc. Absolutely. I had forgotten about kind of like maybe you've got a headphone in one an earbud in one ear that can whisper in some advice and on the fly, just in time prompts and things. And that reminds me of one of the things that I found interesting about teaching online during the pandemic, the fact that you can have students engaged in small group discussions in breakout rooms or whatever it is, and be able to, through personal individual chat, prompt students to participate, like, oh, perhaps you could ask so-and-so this question, or maybe try using this. It's the sort of thing you can't really do in live face-to-face classrooms because it's too intrusive and too obvious. But if you envisage the situation, which I think is being envisaged here in the chat, of a student having an earbud in and an AI listening in and suggesting you could try saying this, or you could ask so-and-so to do this, or prompting you to take action. I've always wanted to have a permanent, on my shoulder little assistant to remind me to do stuff, and I can see that could be great. I was thinking maybe closer to now, voice-driven, small-screen, interactive research devices, one per table for small groups, 4 or 5, to assist with online research that we often ask students to do, but without them getting engaged and actually tapping things in. So they have to take turns to ask for the information, help each other refine the questions, interpret what's being spoken back to them, particularly for language learning. Again, I'm interested here. But of course, at the same time, for these earbuds in students' ears or these devices on the desk, you would want for the teacher to be able to say, okay, turn off all devices, and all devices are dead. Let's all focus on speaking to each other now, or on the board for this, or listen to me, or whatever. So incorporating ways to control that, or for the teacher to be able to control those devices and students' interaction with them. Which is not to say that I think students, one of the things we need to help students with a lot is self-regulation and using the devices and technologies that are available to them in ways that actually help them and don't distract them when they need to, and in thinking about their use critically. But I think for the moment, we need also to be able to turn everything off at will and back on at will reliably. Good comment, though, and very, very interesting comment in the chat.
Yeah, I completely agree, Josh. I think that idea of using AI to personalize learning, to differentiate, so you don't have to do what most teachers need to do, which is, deal with all of the students as one mass and try to help them learn or teach the same thing. So this idea of being able to work a lot more, to do station work, to be able to help students, but to become more of a facilitator, I think, which is happening in a lot of classrooms, in a lot of times, a lot of lessons. But the idea of being able to give students what they need or the practice they need at the time they need it, I think is really interesting. I think one other thing that strikes me is that a teacher will probably, certainly a primary school teacher, I think, and maybe a lower secondary teacher, if these devices that you envisage the earbuds, or as Tom is saying, visors with various tools that can be drawn upon, if they become sort of typical and used by everyone, then I think one of the roles of the teacher will be actually to help students learn how to use them effectively. That will be a role of the teacher, I think, probably.
Yeah. I think that's what I mean by AI readiness. I mean, I don't know whether teachers teachers are AI ready or organizations are AI ready, but it's certainly time to start. Yeah. I don't think that science fiction television series should be leading the way on preparing us for the imminent future. Maybe there should be more space within education for it, deliberate, planned education.
Definitely. So, Josh, we've kind of run over time. I'm going to have to wind things up. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
I'd love to have you back as a guest in the future if you're interested, sometime next year.
Great.
That'd be great.
Thanks very much.
The way that these things are changing so rapidly, I think, in 6 months' time, we'll have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah. And in 5 years' time, we'll see whether any of the predictions
I mean, that's 6 months. I think things are going to be very different in 6 months. So, but in 5 years' time, who knows? Maybe the Teachers Talk radio show will be hosted by a robot.
Certainly my answers will be written by a robot, and they'll be better.
I'm not sure about that. But thanks again, Josh. And thanks everybody for listening and for joining us in the studio. And we'll be back next week with another subject.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.